The sound came out of nowhere, a sharp, desperate cry that shattered the quiet savannah. Dr. Samuel Thornton stopped dead in his tracks, his heart suddenly racing. It wasn't the kind of sound you forget. It was raw, urgent, filled with something almost human. Desperation. Sam stood still, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. For decades he'd worked with elephants, but he had never heard anything like this before. The sun burned overhead as Sam adjusted his pack and scanned the bush around him. He was miles from the nearest village, deep in the Kenyan wilderness, where danger could hide behind every shadow. But this cry, this plea, was impossible to ignore. At 65, Sam wasn't as quick as he used to be, but his instincts kicked in. Something was wrong, very wrong. Brushing aside branches, he followed the sound, his breathing heavy with effort and anticipation. The cries grew louder with every step, pulling him deeper into the unknown. And though he couldn't see what lay ahead, one thought consumed him. Whatever was waiting, it needed him. The cries grew louder, sharper, and more frantic as Sam pushed through the dense undergrowth. Every step felt heavier, as if the sound itself carried a weight that pulled him forward. The bushes scraped against his arms. The uneven ground threatened to trip him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had heard elephants trumpet before, but this was different. It wasn't just noise. It was emotion, pain, fear, desperation. His heart pounded harder with every cry, and a single thought looped through his mind. Something terrible has happened. The air seemed thicker here, the trees casting shadows that danced ominously in the afternoon light. Sam's breath quickened as he moved closer to the source. He had no idea what he was about to find. Finally, the dense wall of trees parted, and Sam stepped into a clearing. His eyes widened at the sight before him. A massive female elephant stood at the center of the clearing, her body trembling ever so slightly. But it wasn't her size or her presence that stopped him cold. It was her eyes. They locked onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. She didn't charge. She didn't run. She just stared, unblinking, her gaze heavy with something Sam had never seen before in a wild animal. It was a plea. For a moment, Sam didn't move. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The elephant, so massive, so powerful, wasn't acting like any wild animal he had encountered before. She wasn't aggressive, nor was she scared. Instead, she stood still, watching him with eyes that seemed to hold a message. Then she moved, just one step forward. Her massive foot shifted, and her trunk extended slightly, almost as if she was reaching for him. A soft rumble escaped her, low and mournful. Sam's breath caught as his eyes fell to her left front leg. She was limping, barely putting weight on it. Even from a distance, he could see the injury, her foot pads swollen and bloodied. "She's hurt," Sam murmured, his instincts as a veterinarian kicking in. Carefully, he reached for his radio, his voice steady, despite the rapid beat of his heart. "I need medical supplies at my location, now." His team responded quickly, but for now, Sam was on his own. Slowly, he took a cautious step forward. "It's okay, girl," he said softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm here to help." To his astonishment, the elephant didn't back away. Instead, she lifted her injured leg slightly, almost as if showing him where it hurt. Sam froze, stunned by the intelligence behind the gesture. Was she really asking for help? Minutes felt like hours as he stood there, caught between amazement and uncertainty. When his team finally arrived, their faces were pale with fear. "Dr. Thornton, are you sure this is safe?" one of them whispered. "She needs us," Sam replied firmly. His voice carried an unusual calm, even as he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The elephant didn't flinch as Sam approached. Her eyes remained locked on his, filled with trust, hope, and something deeper. Something Sam didn't have words for. Sam knelt beside the injured elephant, his movements slow and deliberate. Every muscle in his body was tense, his mind racing through the steps ahead. He spoke softly, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "You're doing great, girl. We're going to help you." The elephant didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, her massive frame towering over him. Her calmness was unlike anything Sam had ever seen in a wild animal. It was as if she understood what was happening, as if she trusted him completely. "Sarah, prepare the anesthetic," Sam instructed quietly. "Tom, hand me the long-handled pliers." His team worked quickly, their faces etched with awe and caution. They had never been this close to a wild elephant before, and certainly not one behaving like this. Sam could feel their tension, but his focus was unshaken. The elephant's life was all that mattered. He examined the wound carefully. The thorn was deeply embedded, its sharp tip glinting angrily under the sunlight. The surrounding tissue was swollen and raw. Sam's heart ached at the thought of the pain she must have endured. "You've been so brave," he murmured, reaching for the pliers. The elephant let out a soft rumble, a sound that carried both discomfort and patience. The anesthetic had taken effect, but Sam still worked with delicate precision. His hands were steady as he grasped the thorn and began to pull. It resisted at first, the flesh holding tightly, but with a firm, careful motion, he finally dislodged it. The thorn was enormous, 6 inches of sharp, cruel wood that had caused unimaginable pain. As Sam held it up, the elephant let out a trumpet so loud and clear it seemed to echo through the entire savanna. But this wasn't a cry of pain, it was relief. She shifted her weight cautiously, testing her injured leg. Her movements were slow but steady, her pain now replaced by visible comfort. Then she turned her gaze to Sam. Her eyes locked onto his with a depth of emotion that made his breath catch. Gratitude. Pure and unmistakable gratitude. Gently, she extended her trunk toward him. Sam didn't move, scarcely daring to breathe. When her trunk touched his face, the gesture was so tender it brought tears to his eyes. "You're welcome," he whispered, his voice breaking. Sam sat by the campfire that night, staring into the flickering flames. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, each moment more surreal than the last. He had always known elephants were intelligent, emotional creatures. But what he experienced today was something else entirely. The look in her eyes, the way she trusted him, it defied explanation. Sam opened his weathered journal, his hands still unsteady from the encounter. Normally, he wrote his observations in precise clinical language, but tonight, no scientific words felt adequate. How could they capture what he had seen? He paused, staring at the blank page. The memory of her trunk gently touching his face lingered, vivid and overwhelming. It wasn't just an animal seeking help. It was a connection, a bond he had never thought possible. Sam's pen finally moved across the paper, his thoughts flowing in a way they hadn't before. "This wasn't just an injured elephant," he wrote. "This was communication, trust, gratitude, a depth of emotion that challenges everything we know." He stopped writing and leaned back, gazing at the stars above. His heart was heavy with questions. What if this wasn't a one-time event? What if elephants were capable of far more than anyone realized? As the fire crackled softly, Sam made a decision. He had to learn more. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It was an opportunity, one that could change everything. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day, but Sam couldn't shake the memory of the elephant from his mind. He had spent every moment since studying their behavior, hoping to understand the connection he had witnessed. Then, one afternoon, it happened again. Sam was observing a small family group of elephants from a distance, his binoculars scanning their every move. Suddenly, one of the adult females paused and turned her head, her trunk raised as if scenting the air. Sam froze. She began to move toward him, her steps deliberate and steady. Sam's pulse quickened as he lowered his binoculars. Could it be her? The rest of the herd stayed behind, unbothered by her movements. As the elephant drew closer, Sam's breath caught. It was her, the same elephant he had helped. He was sure of it. "Is it really you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The elephant stopped just a few feet away, her intelligent eyes meeting his once again. Then slowly she extended her trunk, gently touching his face in the same tender gesture she had used before. It was a moment of undeniable recognition. Sam's heart swelled with emotions he couldn't put into words. He spoke softly, almost as if speaking to a friend. "I didn't think I'd see you again, girl. Do you remember me?" The elephant responded with a low, soft rumble. To Sam, it felt like an answer, a greeting, and a confirmation all at once. For the next hour, she stayed near him, her presence calm and curious. Occasionally, she reached out with her trunk, making soft gestures and sounds that Sam couldn't fully understand but felt compelled to try. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, her herd began to move, calling her back. She lingered for a moment, looking at Sam with an expression he could only describe as gratitude. Then, with one last rumble, she turned and followed her family into the bush. Sam stood there long after she disappeared, the weight of the encounter sinking in. This wasn't just coincidence. She remembered him. She had sought him out, and somehow she was trying to communicate. The questions in his mind burned brighter now. What was she trying to say? Sam's world had shifted. That second encounter with the elephant, who he now called Nala, a Swahili word for gift, wasn't just remarkable. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Determined to understand her, Sam poured himself into research. He combed through scientific papers, reached out to experts on elephant behavior, and even spoke to local tribespeople who had lived alongside elephants for generations. Everyone had stories of their intelligence, their emotions, but no one had witnessed anything quite like this. Meanwhile, Nala began visiting more frequently. Each time she seemed to bring something new, a sound, a gesture, a behavior Sam hadn't seen before. She wasn't just a curious animal, she was teaching him. Sam started documenting everything: her rumbles, the movements of her trunk, the way she interacted with her environment. Patterns began to emerge. Certain sounds appeared to convey specific meanings. A low, gentle rumble seemed to signal calm or reassurance. Sharp, rhythmic movements of her trunk carried a sense of urgency. The realization hit Sam like a lightning bolt. This wasn't random behavior. Nala was using a form of language. But how far could this go? Was it just her, or did other elephants share this ability? Sam began to mimic her sounds and gestures, awkward at first but improving over time. He was astonished when Nala responded. She seemed to understand, reacting with curiosity and even encouragement. Word of his work began to spread. Researchers from around the world reached out, eager to study what he had discovered. But for Sam, it wasn't about the fame. It was about the bond, this incredible connection that defied everything he thought he knew. One day, Nala did something that took their relationship to an entirely new level. She approached him with an object in her trunk, a smooth, worn branch. She set it down gently at his feet, then looked at him expectantly. At first, Sam thought it was a random offering, but as the days went on, she brought more: stones, bits of bark, even a discarded plastic bottle she'd found. Each time she watched him intently, waiting for his reaction. It dawned on him that she wasn't just bringing objects, she was sharing. It was as if she wanted to exchange discoveries, to connect with him in a way no one had ever imagined. Sam knew he had stumbled onto something groundbreaking. This wasn't just about elephants understanding humans. It was about humans understanding them. Nala wasn't just a subject of study. She was a partner in discovery, and together, they were unlocking the secrets of a world no one had thought to explore. It was a quiet morning when Sam heard the familiar sound of a low rumble in the distance. He knew immediately it was Nala. Over the months, she had become a frequent visitor, but this time, something was different. Her rumble was louder, more urgent. Sam stepped out of his tent and saw her approaching, her massive frame moving quickly yet deliberately. She stopped just short of him, her eyes wide and filled with what Sam could only describe as distress. Her trunk moved restlessly, gesturing toward the bush. "Nala, what's wrong?" Sam asked softly, already sensing that this wasn't a routine visit. Nala let out a series of sharp, short rumbles, her trunk pointing repeatedly in the same direction. Sam's chest tightened as he realized what she was asking him to do. Follow her. Without hesitation, Sam grabbed his medical bag and radioed his team. "It's Nala. Something's wrong. I'm going with her." The journey was tense and silent, save for Nala's occasional glances back at Sam, as if ensuring he was keeping up. The bush grew denser, the path narrower, but she moved with purpose, her steps steady and sure. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing. Sam's heart sank. A baby elephant lay on its side in the center of the clearing. Its small body trembled, and its labored breathing was audible even from a distance. Nala moved to its side, rumbling softly as she nudged the calf with her trunk. Sam dropped to his knees beside the calf, his instincts taking over. The little one was dehydrated, its skin hot to the touch. Fever, infection. It was critical. "I'm going to help," Sam said, looking up at Nala. Her eyes met his, pleading yet trusting. She reached out, her trunk brushing his shoulder in a gesture that felt like encouragement. Sam radioed for emergency supplies, and when his team arrived, they worked quickly. Fluids, antibiotics, fever reducers. It was a race against time. Nala stayed close, rumbling soothingly to the calf and occasionally reaching out to touch Sam, as if to reassure both him and herself. After hours of tension, the calf's breathing steadied, and it managed to stand on shaky legs. The moment it took its first unsteady steps toward Nala, the entire herd emerged from the shadows, trumpeting in what could only be described as celebration. Nala turned to Sam, her eyes filled with gratitude beyond words. Slowly, she wrapped her trunk around him in a gentle, unmistakable hug. Sam sat quietly that evening, the memories of the day replaying in his mind. The trust Nala had shown, the connection between her and her herd, and the extraordinary way she had sought his help. These were things he couldn't ignore. He wasn't just witnessing behavior, he was witnessing communication. The next day, as he recorded his thoughts, a group of children from a nearby village visited the research station. They were curious but cautious, their perceptions of elephants shaped by fear and stories of crops destroyed. Sam introduced them to the basics of what he had observed, showing them recordings of Nala's rumbles and gestures. One little girl, Amina, no older than 7, raised her hand. Her wide eyes sparkled with curiosity as she asked, "Dr. Sam, do you think Nala could teach us how to talk to elephants?" Sam froze, the simplicity of her question hitting him like a revelation. He had spent so much time trying to understand Nala from a scientific perspective that he hadn't considered what this knowledge could mean for others. "You know, Amina," he said slowly, a smile forming on his face. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's find out together." And so, the Elephant Language Program was born. Sam and his team developed a curriculum that simplified the basics of elephant communication. Participants, both children and adults, learned to interpret rumbles, body language, and even mimic some sounds. Nala played an instrumental role, often approaching the observation area during these lessons. She seemed to understand her role as a teacher, demonstrating sounds and gestures patiently. When the children got something wrong, she would rumble softly, almost like a gentle correction. And when they succeeded, Her playful sprays of water brought laughter and delight. Word of the program spread quickly. Farmers who once saw elephants as pests began to understand their behaviors. Former poachers, moved by the depth of intelligence and emotion they saw, became some of the most passionate advocates for conservation. Through Nala, Sam wasn't just bridging the gap between humans and elephants. He was changing lives. It was a quiet afternoon when Sam received the news that made his blood run cold. Poachers had been spotted dangerously close to the area where Nala's herd often roamed. The tension in the air was palpable as his team prepared to act, but before they could leave, Sam heard a familiar sound, a low, urgent rumble. Nala was there, standing at the edge of the research station. Her trunk moved restlessly, and her eyes were filled with unmistakable alarm. Sam approached cautiously. "What is it, Nala?" he asked softly. Her gestures were sharp and purposeful. She raised her trunk and pointed toward the horizon, rumbling in quick, panicked bursts. Sam had spent enough time with her to understand. The herd was in danger. He quickly radioed his team. "We need to move now. Nala's leading us." The group followed Nala deep into the bush. Her movements were swift, her determination clear. The thick vegetation slowed the humans down, but Nala pressed on, glancing back to ensure they kept up. After what felt like an eternity, Nala stopped abruptly. Her trunk stretched forward, pointing toward a small clearing. Sam signaled his team to move quietly, his heart pounding as they approached the edge. Through the trees, they spotted the poachers' camp. There, tied to a tree, was a terrified elephant calf. The sight made Sam's chest tighten with anger and sorrow. "We'll handle the poachers," the local law enforcement team whispered. "You focus on the calf." As the authorities moved in, Sam and his team approached the trembling baby. The moment they untied it, the calf let out a high-pitched trumpet of fear. But almost immediately, a powerful chorus of trumpets echoed from the bush. The herd had been waiting nearby. Nala was the first to emerge, rushing to the calf's side. Her trunk moved over the baby, examining it carefully. Once satisfied it was unharmed, she turned to Sam. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Sam saw gratitude so deep it brought tears to his eyes. Slowly, Nala extended her trunk and gently touched his shoulder. "You're welcome," Sam whispered, his voice shaking. The story of how Nala and Sam worked together to thwart the poachers made headlines worldwide, bringing renewed attention to their mission. But for Sam, it wasn't about fame. It was about trust. As the months passed, Sam's work at the research center flourished. The story of Nala's trust and the bond between humans and elephants captured hearts across the world. People were no longer just hearing about conservation. They were feeling it, understanding it on a personal level. Nala continued to play a central role in this transformation. She became more than a subject of study. She was a bridge between two worlds. Time and time again, she demonstrated intelligence, emotion, and a willingness to connect that left everyone in awe. One morning, Sam arrived at the observation deck to find Nala waiting for him. But this time, she wasn't alone. Several members of her herd were with her, including young calves. It was as if she was introducing him to her family. Sam watched in amazement as Nala gently nudged one of the calves forward. The little one hesitated but eventually approached, its tiny trunk reaching out toward Sam. He stood perfectly still, letting the calf explore. The moment was simple, yet profound, a testament to the trust Nala had built and now shared with her herd. Word spread quickly. Visitors from around the world came to the research center to witness the bond between humans and elephants. Children who once feared elephants now saw them as friends. Farmers who had considered them pests began to appreciate their intelligence and the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Sam's greatest joy came from the elephant language program. Nala seemed to take pride in her role as a teacher, guiding each new group of students with patience and care. She rumbled happily when they succeeded and gently corrected them when they struggled. One day, as Sam watched a group of school children learning to mimic elephant sounds, he realized the true legacy of his work. It wasn't just about science or conservation. It was about connection. Nala had started it all with a cry for help, but now she was helping humans and elephants understand each other in ways no one had thought possible. As the sun set over the savannah, Sam stood with Nala by his side, their silhouettes framed by the golden light. He smiled softly, knowing their work was far from over, but together they had already changed the world. The savannah was quiet, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows over the land. Sam stood on the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the horizon where Nala and her herd grazed peacefully. Their massive forms moved with a grace that always left him in awe. It was in these quiet moments that Sam reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a desperate cry for help had grown into something he could never have imagined, a bond, a connection that bridged the gap between species. Nala lifted her trunk and turned to look at him. The gesture was simple, yet Sam knew exactly what it meant. Over the years, he had come to recognize this as her way of saying hello, a shared acknowledgement that needed no words. He raised his hand in response, a smile spreading across his face. It was such a small exchange, but it carried so much meaning. It reminded him of the journey they had shared, the trust that had been built, and the lives that had been changed because of it. Sam thought about the children who now came to the research center, eager to learn the language of elephants. He thought about the farmers who had once seen elephants as enemies, now working to protect their habitats. And he thought about the former poachers who, inspired by Nala's intelligence and emotion, had become some of the strongest advocates for conservation. As the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Sam made a silent promise. He would keep working. He would keep building bridges of understanding. He would keep fighting for a future where humans and elephants could live side by side, not as adversaries, but as fellow travelers on this extraordinary journey of life. Nala let out a soft, contented rumble, breaking the stillness of the evening. Sam chuckled softly, mimicking the sound in his own clumsy way. It wasn't perfect, but Nala didn't seem to mind. The connection was what mattered. And as Sam turned to leave, he felt a deep sense of hope. Nala's trust, her cry for help all those years ago, had sparked a change that would echo for generations. The world was listening now, and Sam knew that together they could create a future where all life was valued and protected.